we might be able to answer here together as a large group, as well as we'll be able to give you information on where to go to have some answers or answers to your questions should you have them. As Lila mentioned, we are recording this webinar so that it will be available to you for later, as well as for those that are not joining live. In our short time together today, we're going to review the reasons for the change in teacher evaluation, what that change will look like, and the implementation timeline to include the transition that will be involved in the system, and finally, potential steps for you as a teacher, and then we will close with some Q&A. So let's get started with talking about what is Expanded ADEPT. ADEPT, the acronym, stands for Assisting, Developing, and Evaluating Professional Teaching. ADEPT is the regulation that governs teacher evaluation in the state of South Carolina. SAFE-T is the current process for evaluating teachers and specialists' professional practice. SAFE-T is a portfolio-based approach to evaluating practice and has been in place since 2006. SAFE-T is being replaced for classroom-based teachers. Specialist groups, to include library media specialists, school counselors, and speech and language pathologists, will continue to be using SAFE-T. In the past, federal expectations related to No Child Left Behind forced the State Department to re-examine teacher evaluation and implement a system that was focused heavily on accountability. That legislation was reauthorized in December of 2015, giving states greater autonomy over how teachers were evaluated. The Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, provided the state of South Carolina an opportunity to thoughtfully revise our system in a way that was more meaningful to teachers and would lead to better outcomes for students. The changes taking place in teacher evaluation are not about proving your effectiveness as an educator, but rather improving upon your effective practices as a teacher. We are often asked, if the government isn't requiring the change, then why are we changing? The short answer is, it was time. Our students are changing, and the skills and abilities they need to be college and career ready have changed. Likewise, our educators need to be equipped with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to lead today's classroom. Those evaluating teachers need to also be equipped to provide feedback related to that classroom leadership. So the profile became front and center in our thinking and decisions as we designed an evaluation process that reflects those changes. You are likely aware that the Office of Educator Effectiveness engaged in a statewide educator feedback sweep in early 2016 in order to gauge educator perceptions of the changes taking place within the evaluation system. Close to 11,000 teachers and principals took part in that feedback opportunity. The results, along with recommendations to the department, are posted on our website, and the feedback was clear. Educators desired an evaluation system designed for professional growth and development, moving away from one of a checklist. Teachers saw benefits within the SLO process, but wanted it to align to their practice versus using it as an isolated, weighted measure. Also included is feedback that mirrors what is shared in our opening slide related to what should and should not be included in evaluation feedback today. And some of those examples I saw were relevant feedback based on evidence within the observation, feedback that nurtures continued growth. All of those are similar to what we heard within our evaluation perception survey. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tria, who will continue with the next set of slides.
So Chris explained the why. Let's take a look at the how and the what. Specifically how the process will look and what resources are available. We're moving from SAFE-T and the ADEPT Performance Standards, or APSs, to a process that will be focused on observations and shorter feedback cycles with the South Carolina Teaching Standards. SLOs will stay. Let's take a look at an example of an APS using instructional strategies. If someone were coming to observe you using this standard, what's missing? Type some ideas into the Q&A box. Also think about what's missing from the SAFE-T process. So when you think about SAFE-T, we're missing maybe specific feedback on content, a common language about our content. For instance, what strategies are appropriate for my content and students, and getting into classrooms. Feedback about the process. Because the feedback comes so far after the lesson, it's hard to use it to grow. So that's right, Lee. Exactly. Examples of some strategies. So with the change in the system, you'll get more specific feedback and timely feedback so that you can make those changes. Let's contrast this with an example from the South Carolina Teaching Standards. This one APS actually matches up with 3 different indicators: presenting instructional content, teacher content knowledge, and teacher knowledge of students. Notice how the teacher knowledge of students indicator fleshes out how strategies need to be appropriate by matching students' learning needs, their interests, their cultural background, and the varied obstacles that get in the way of their mastery of content. The selection of the new rubric was led by the South Carolina Department of Education and an advisory group made up of educators across the state. The rubric was identified as a tool that is validated, supportive of educator professional growth and development, and aligned with instructional practices that will enable students to meet the standards for college and career readiness in the profile of the South Carolina graduate. The new South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 rubric will better support educators with specific feedback related to professional practice. This tool is designed to assess a teacher's professional practice and hosts 4 domains: instruction, environment, planning, and professionalism, each with indicators and specific descriptors that differentiate levels of performance. The new rubric is aligned to the profile of the South Carolina graduate. It's research-based to lead to instruction that raises performance, and it supports districts in effective instructional leadership, making it easier to focus on professional development with common language and practices for observation. The ADEPT system is designed as a tool to assess instruction as well as improve it. Our goal is to provide students in South Carolina with a high-quality education led by effective educators. Evaluations are a mechanism to help us accomplish that. You'll notice student growth is in the center of the domains. This doesn't mean that student growth is a 5th domain. Rather, all of the indicators are supported by the collection of student growth. Let's take a closer look at the structure of the South Carolina Teaching Standards rubric. There are 4 domains with 23 indicators. There are also 4 performance levels for planning, environment, and instruction. Professionalism is slightly different, using a combination of the teacher and administrator's reflection. These next 2 slides will highlight each element of the rubric. The domains are the big buckets. Indicators are the specific elements of practice. You'll note the indicator on the left side, standards and objectives. And the descriptors describe what performance looks like at each level. So think about the specific feedback that teachers were asking about. By having these indicators and descriptors, you can get that specific feedback and know exactly what you would need to do to move from one level to the next. The 4 performance levels are the biggest difference from the APSs. So we're moving from just met and not met to 4 levels of differentiation with specific feedback to guide you from one level to the next. So again, we have 4 levels of performance, moving from unsatisfactory to exemplary. It becomes increasingly student-centered as we move to the left to exemplary. Look at the 3rd level, or proficient. 3, proficient, is rock-solid teaching. It represents 1 year of student growth. We live in 3, and we visit 4. For example, Serena Williams is one of the best tennis players that ever lived. She doesn't hit an ace with every serve. She loses points in games, even though she's a pro. She still has a coach. Her game continues to evolve. It's just like teaching. This tool gives us feedback about our lessons so that we can continue to improve and deepen our practice over the course of what we hope will be very long careers inside the classroom. As much as the common language provided by the rubric will be powerful, the process will also feel very different from the end of the semester meeting with SAFE-T. For instance, the observation process will consist of pre and post conferences and self-reflection. This is a shift for many evaluators, and they're going through a 3-day training and practice. Even more resources are being developed for coaching that's aligned philosophically with the training induction mentors receive. Your principal will be engaging you in dialogue during the pre and post conferences. This is meant to press on you to be reflective. All teachers will zoom in on areas of reinforcement and refinement. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lilla.
And I'm going to walk over to the mic that's closer to Tria and Chris so it's a little bit easier on your ears. So we've heard a little bit about the why, and we've heard a little bit about the what as far as the South Carolina teaching standards replacing the ADEPT performance standards. But one thing that will remain constant is student learning objectives. But they represent a big shift as far as the way that our evaluation system is organized. If you think about SAFE-T, many of you maybe participated in SAFE-T this year, doing your first annual observation. Maybe a few of you served on ADEPT teams as evaluators. For some of you, it could have been way back in the day. You went through the first SAFE-T and you haven't thought about it since. But it's a great system, but it's a portfolio-based system. It's really about the things you produce being equal evidence to your observations. And we think that something like a unit work sample can be very great evidence of your planning. But we want to shift the emphasis with our new evaluation system over to using artifacts that really reflect the student experience and your work and professionalism as a teacher. And we think SLOs are really perfect for that. First of all, we think SLOs reflect the teaching process, what you're thinking about in that moment with your actual students. SLOs put the emphasis on your individual students, and no one knows them better than you do. SLOs focus on growth of students versus one proficiency level for every single student in your classroom. It also encourages collaboration and the ongoing review of student data and responsive instructional practices. Finally, it honors your professionalism and expertise responding to the needs of your specific students and talking about the choices you make in the process. We absolutely don't want to create extra paperwork for you in the form of long-range plans or unit work samples. We want to think about how evaluation can honor the process, the really hard process of teaching that you do every single day. To end the webinar, we're excited to think about some ways that you can get involved. And I would encourage you, we'll have some time for questions at the end. There is a Q&A box, and I am storing up the questions as you go. So if you want to start typing questions in, we'll be able to see them.
All right, thank you, Lilla. So let's talk a little bit about what the next couple of years are going to look like. Just as a reminder, the expanded ADEPT evaluation revisions are appropriate for classroom-based teachers. A classroom-based teacher is defined as one that plans, delivers, and assesses instruction to students over time. Revisions for library media specialists, speech and language therapists, and school counselors will occur in the future after we've fully implemented the system for teachers. When ESSA reauthorized the legislation and allowed flexibility at the state level, that allowed us to extend our implementation timeline and phase in our approach to implementation. A 2-year training period is underway and will be completed before the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 rubric is implemented statewide. In this slide, you see our current school year on the left, labeled recalibration, as we've adjusted our approach and timeline for implementation. We've also started some training. On the right, you see the full implementation of the new system beginning in 2018-19. The middle column of the graphic, representing next school year, will look differently across the state as districts are in varying degrees of readiness for implementation. For example, TAP schools are familiar with this rubric as well as the SLOs and may transition more quickly than others. Some districts may choose to implement the use of the South Carolina Teaching Standards rubric early and have been provided guidance within the training on how to do that thoughtfully. Notice the training rollout over the 3 years. As a teacher, you will be oriented differently depending on your district implementation plans. That may be as early as this spring semester or as late as fall of 2018. Regardless of your district timeline, there are many things you can do to get ready. We'll talk about those a little bit later on in the presentation. Please note that before anyone can serve as an evaluator, they must successfully complete some of the training you see on this slide. Training is a rigorous program that culminates in a performance-based certification assessment. This builds consistency of implementation across classrooms and schools. This slide had a lot of information, so I want to just step back and provide some key takeaways. First of all, remember that teachers in the state will continue to be evaluated under SAFE-T or another South Carolina Department of Education approved alternative instrument during the transition phase in 2017-18. Note that if your district uses an approved alternative approach to evaluation, that approval process will continue to be available. Beginning in 2018-19, educators and districts using the state model for evaluation will be using the expanded ADEPT system for evaluation and will be using the South Carolina Teaching Standards rubric in place of SAFE-T. Within our system guidelines, we have provided districts with suggested type and frequency of observation at each contract level. You'll notice that what's suggested is differentiated, as teachers at varying levels need varying degrees of support. All districts represent different levels of capacity. As a state agency, it's important to note that guidelines declare the minimal expectations, and districts can choose to observe more frequently. Note that all announced observations, whether it's formative or summative evaluation year, will involve a pre- and a post-conference. This assures that teachers are receiving timely feedback related to their classroom practice. Probably the biggest change outside of the pre- and post-conferencing occurs at the continuing contract level. Once every 5 years in the year of recertification, continuing contract teachers will be observed and will be provided feedback related to their practice. Notice also that regardless of what contract level you reside, an SLO is expected annually. The Office of Educator Effectiveness has been thoughtful about how to involve key stakeholders throughout this process. Examples of this include training of various groups, and guest columns within professional organization newsletters. We thank you for joining our maiden voyage in the land of virtual connection through this webinar, and we certainly hope to continue offering this as a vehicle for communication to the teachers statewide. Additionally, expect to hear more about the South Carolina Teaching Standards rubric and related professional development at various conferences throughout the state. We are in this journey together, and you have some preliminary work as well. You are the driver in making the changes that are occurring in ADEPT about your own growth. Here are some of the ideas for you to take back and try right away. Lila mentioned that there were files that are available in this webinar for download. If you've not already done so, take the time to download the rubric. It's also available on our website. Take it back to your classroom. Reflect on where your practice is. What does it look like and sound like for each of those 23 indicators? Are you leading your classroom in a student-centered manner? Are you in a growth mindset, one that supports this kind of change? Have you thought about becoming a teacher leader? Teacher leadership is part of the change management. Share what you've learned today with others, and let your leadership team know that you're ready to help. Think of ways to make this work within your context. Lastly, stay connected. There's a treasure trove of information that resides on our website. Take the time to investigate what's there. Clicking on any of the feature boxes behind it unlocks several resources. Check back frequently, as we're about to flip some of those resources as we enter the spring and ready for the next school year. I'm going to pass the slide to Lila, I believe, who is going to show you some features on our website, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Hi guys, thanks so much for those questions that are coming in through the Q&A box. Feel free to keep those coming. If I can figure out, I'm going to share my screen with you and show you our educator effectiveness website. So just give me just a moment. You can find us at ed.sc.gov if you want to follow along, and just go to educator effectiveness. And let me see if I can drag this puppy into our screen. We've also had a number of questions come up in the chat box about how to see the documents that we shared at the beginning. I'll make sure to drag that back in so that we can see that. So hold on for just a moment. And share my screen. You're going to see my cute kids for a second. And here we go. Here's our educator effectiveness website. You can see it at ed.sc.gov. If you click on educators, there are tons of options here. You can check out a lot of things on the State Department website. But if you click on educators and scroll down, not to teaching, not to certification, not to educator preparation, but all the way down second from the bottom to educator effectiveness, you'll see our lovely website. In the top left-hand corner, communications is the nearest and dearest to my heart. We try our best to make sure that anything that we're posting for district, ADEPT coordinators, anything we're posting for principals is also available right here for teachers. We want to be as transparent as possible with what we're doing. I am about a month or two behind, but I know that our December newsletter is up here. But by this Friday, I will get us back up to date. This is motivating me now that I'm seeing where we are. You guys can also check out in the SCEA and PSTA newsletters. Once a month, we publish a column. We've really tried to focus on the South Carolina teaching standards for the past few months, and we'll continue to do that. And those newsletters have great ideas about how you can work those to the point. Newsletters have great tips about how you can work the South Carolina teaching standards into your current practice. If you are curious about anything else that comes under our umbrella, including the South Carolina teaching standards, the guidelines for expanded ADEPT, and the guidance that we give to districts, including SLO forms, those are in the purple box, Educator Evaluation Guidance. You can also check out those forms for evaluation of school counselors, speech language therapists, and library and media specialists right here in the middle. If you're a principal or interested in principal evaluation, you can check out our PDEP resources. And then all the way down at the bottom, our training toolkit on SLOs is really extensive. And it has a lot of information that is both directly for teachers, but also for SLO evaluators. So we would love for you to check out our website. And our contact information is on the things that we work with. So you will see Tria and Chris and Willa's name come up. So if you ever have a question or you think we're missing a resource, we would absolutely love for you guys to let us know what you need. One of the things we struggle with the most at the state level is how can we get information directly out to teachers. So we'd love your ideas.
Lila, there is a question on the question box asking where this recording will be
Excellent.
housed.
It will be in educator effectiveness. If you click on that communications box, it will be stored there, and we'll also have the live link there for the next couple months.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on for just a moment, and I'll get us out of sharing my screen. All right, we're about to head to our question and answer section. If you can bear with us for just a minute. Excellent. Before we go to the question and answer section, I'm excited. There have been questions coming in along the way and more coming in now. If you could check out after the webinar or even right now, the website that's in front of you, tinyurl.com/expandedadept. We would love to continue to receive your feedback. We know that the new evaluation system isn't rolling out until 2018, 2019. So we've got some time to hear from teachers what kind of supports you'd like to have, and quite honestly, to get your feedback on the webinar today. So that is a survey that you can take today and give us some additional feedback. And we're going to start with a question from the crowd. So this brings me back to my radio days when I used to get to do the sports call-in show. Our first question is, I'm a continuing contract teacher from Kathleen Arquino. Could you please go over, actually, she doesn't say she's a continuing contract teacher, but she does say, could you please go over the continuing contract requirements one more time? And this is one of our most popular questions from both districts and teachers.
Sure. This is the slide where that context was presented, and really, again, these are what's in our recommended guidelines. They have not yet been board approved, but however, I would tell you that what's represented in those guidelines have been drafted in collaboration of a lot of stakeholders. And so I want to remind you that this is, in fact, minimal expectations, and that districts could choose to evaluate more. And likely the biggest change, and maybe not so much anymore, since this is a continued piece that has kind of transpired from the last revision into the new ADEPT system, is that in order to provide ongoing feedback, we really needed to look at that continuing contract GBE process. And while some districts may have been observing their continuing contract teachers, there were many that were not. And so we are adding the requirement that in that recertification year, a continuing contract teacher is observed in the classroom and provided the same feedback that teachers in other licensure levels would get. And so we're expecting one full, and we call it a comprehensive classroom observation with a pre and a post per semester with conferences, as well as one, I'm sorry, yes, I'm on the right line, but at 4:30 this gets difficult. As well as each educator is writing one SLO annually.
Thanks so much, Chris. Our next question is about induction. How will the new South Carolina teaching standards model impact induction and mentoring, particularly pre and post conferences?
That is a great question. I would say that within the mentoring curriculum already, they have embedded a coaching protocol as well as some approaches to providing feedback. So we are very much in alignment with Sarah on the training, and that module 3 will be developed and redeveloped until we land in a secure place with what's expected in 1819. I would also add that as a mentor that's supporting an induction level teacher in the 17-18 transition year, you will play an important part in helping that teacher to understand the linkages between the APS standards that they're using for induction and the new South Carolina teaching standards. And to help with that, we've included a crosswalk that is now part of the mentor training, as well as the evaluator training that we're doing with principals and evaluators.
Another question related to that is,
will there be evaluation teams or consensus teams? That is up to the district as to whether or not they want to approach this in a team or consensus-based approach. There will be evaluators involved in the evaluation of team members in circumstances where they need to have the evaluation teams. So there is guidance within the guidelines that talk about the use of teams. In the event that you are a teacher that will be asked to be on a team, you would need to go through the evaluator training and be certified to be part of that team.
Great. We're going to shift our focus and questions to the SLO track. We've had a few questions about SLOs. The first one being, I teach at an alternative school and I have pretty small class sizes. How is my SLO different?
It's a great question, and it's really a hard one to answer without knowing the context of your alternative school setting. For example, some alternative school settings are recovery credits based on an online program, while others may be, a GED program. So it's very hard to say. However, if you do fit the definition of a classroom-based teacher where you are planning, instructing, and assessing students over time, SLOs, as well as the use of the South Carolina Teaching Standard rubric, would be appropriate.
Excellent. I have a question that I'll tackle since it's so nicely written. If long-range plans, I want to read the actual word. If long-range plans are no longer required, how do teachers know the background and needs of their students? That's a great feature of long-range planning, and it's definitely there are descriptors within the rubric in the planning and environment areas that definitely would knowledge of students as well as the indicator teacher knowledge of students, which is all about how teachers use their knowledge to respond to student needs inside their classrooms. But even more than that, I think the SLO and where you talk about the student's background is an essential part that's already built in to our evaluation system that we don't need to repeat. Our next question I'll put over to Tria and Chris, and we probably have time for about 5 more minutes worth of questions, so feel free to get them in there and I'll synthesize and get us to answer as many as possible. Student-centered instruction is really, really hard in my special education classroom. Do you have any tips for me?
I would say this, as a special educator or an educator within any context that might be unique, and we hear this a lot from teachers. Over the next 2 years, I really encourage you to bring that rubric into your classroom and think about what that language of that rubric looks like and sounds like in your practice. I know as educators, or as a teacher, I was frustrated sometimes, feeling like my evaluator might not have understood my context as well as he or she should have. But that's where, as an educator, I play a role. And so over the next 2 years, as a special education teacher, start to think about how you can communicate what each one of those indicators looks like and sounds like, and are able to present that to your evaluator in preparation for that observation. Also, I highly encourage that if you're involved in any professional organizations with other special educators, that you work together to advocate for what those indicators look like and sound like within the practice. That's one of the very reasons why we've introduced this rubric so early, so that folks can take that leadership role in making this meaningful for their context.
Thanks so much. We had a few questions that asked, could we just see the indicators of the rubric again? We put those up for you, and we'll make sure that we get the share where you can download the rubric directly back up on the screen after we answer a few more questions. I'll answer an easy one, and then I'll send a more involved one to my team. The easy one, can we get recertification credit for this webinar? Unfortunately, that's a lengthy process that involves us interacting with another agency here, so we can't offer any recertification credit for you today, but we're really, really glad that you're here, and we hope that the experience of being here and getting information is worth your while. Another question that we got is, when are the South Carolina teacher evaluator trainings, and how can I get involved? That's something that we've asked districts to sign their evaluators up for first, and we've also trained districts this year, and districts going forward will be conducting their own training for additional evaluators. So if you are currently on ADEPT teams and you think you'll be an ADEPT evaluator in the future, it's very likely that you'll be asked to come to that training in the future. Here's a question for our team. For a teacher to receive proficient, does that teacher need to show a year's worth of student growth? If so, how is a year's worth of growth determined, and what percentage of students need to show a year's worth of growth?
Okay, so I'm not 100% confident that I understand the question fully, so I'm going to attempt, and if not, I'm going to encourage you to email us, and we'll dive deeply into it. Remember that we are writing SLOs annually, and that SLO process, I would say, is rich and is really a process that encompasses best practices that we likely engage in already, and if not, it provides us an opportunity to get better at our craft. That being said, there is guidance in the guidelines that will talk about the score of the SLO, and that is the student growth measure. And while we would acknowledge that that SLO encompasses one small snippet of many standards, we would recognize that is a mechanism for us to be very thoughtful about our students' formative assessment and how we respond to what is needed in our practice. So that score, there's guidance on how to incorporate the score of that SLO into the effectiveness rating of a teacher. Now, if that's not the angle that we were going, the second part of your question was, how do we know that proficient represents 1 year's worth of growth? I would tell you that NIET, the creator of the rubric, has done validation studies, and in districts and states where this rubric has been implemented for years, they have been able to correlate that level 3 proficient is relating to 1 year's worth of student growth. The level unsatisfactory and needs improvement is less than, and then anyone that is in the exemplary is showing more than 1 year's worth of student growth. So I hope that answered it for now, and if not, certainly circle back with us.
Excellent. I think one of our final questions is near and dear to my heart. You keep referring to new guidelines for the expanded ADEPT system. When will these be released?
That is a question that has been near and dear to all of our hearts. It has been a labor of love, and we did not want to do it quickly because we wanted to make sure that what we present to the Board of Education was a thoughtful approach to teacher evaluation. And knowing that we were not fully implementing until 2018-19, we did not want to rush that. However, I am pleased to announce that we are nearing the final draft and hope to be presenting it for approval in March to the State Board of Education. And I want to emphasize hoping to. If not March, with 100% certainty, it will be April.
Excellent. Our final question is, we mentioned in the very first slide what we hope that pre and post observation conferences should look and feel like, and what they shouldn't look and feel like. Tria, can you tell us a little bit, especially for folks with TAP experience, will those pre and post conferences be similar? What can teachers expect?
They should expect, when speaking with their evaluator, to look at the strengths within the lesson and not general information, but specific data and specific suggestions. They should also expect to be listened to. They should expect to leave with a plan. They should expect to talk about areas of refinement, to really stretch and to move instruction forward. So I noticed in the comments earlier that some folks said it shouldn't be a gotcha, it should focus on the data. And that's right, that's the way it's set up. It's focusing on data, it's focusing on your evidence. It's not a gotcha. It's a professional time for you all to focus on your professional growth. And that's how it should look. So your comments that you all sent earlier are spot on. That's how it should look.
And I'm going to add to what Tria had mentioned, in that when we train our evaluators in the post-conference, the evaluator is expected to identify one area of reinforcement or refinement. That would be, and all of us have room to grow. As Tria said, Serena Williams, elite athlete, she even has days where she's not, reaching that level 4. So each one of those post-conferences is designed to identify an area of strength and an area of reinforcement. And that's there's a big presumption there that even the most proficient of teachers are hungry for feedback and have room to grow.
Thanks so much, Chris and Tria, for being willing to field those questions as we go. And even more, thank you so much to everyone on the line that made time to come. Just for my own curiosity, if you don't mind just typing into the Q&A box, if you were here and you had more than one person in your room, we're really curious about how many people actually showed up today. So if you have a whole faculty nestled around a computer, like some principals that called me earlier in the day and we're trying to get their tech ready, you could just let me know how many people are there. That would be great. My commitment to you is that we will get this whole recording up on the website by the end of the week. We are having trouble getting the files for download up on this screen. So when we close out the call, I'm going to circle back to the very first screen we had at the beginning, and those files will be available for download. And I just wanted to plug one more time. We never stop wanting to get your feedback and hearing your voice. So if you could follow the link to our survey, tinyurl.com/expanded-adept. We really appreciate getting your feedback either on this process, since this is our first webinar, or more importantly, on what you need for the evaluation system going forward. Thank you so much for your time. We hope that you have an excellent afternoon, and we appreciate all you do for students and your colleagues here in South Carolina.
Thank you. Thank you.